So this is Building a Better Approach to Secondary Intervention. That's today's webinar discussion. I'm going to go over to our little agenda here. We like to keep it simple and straightforward. I'll tell you a little bit about the Zoom norms and how to use that to submit any questions you have or to chat with your fellow attendees. Then we'll have our discussion. We have our presenters today, Shannon Carroll-Frey, the Director of Secondary Teaching and Learning from Center Grove Community School Corporation, and Nikki Previtt from Edmentum. They'll tell you a little bit more about themselves in just a moment. At the end, as time permits, we will have some Q&A. So if you have those, you can send them in, and then we'll have some additional resources. But I'm going to take down the slides for now and go over to our panel. I'm actually going to have Nikki introduce herself first and tell you all about the work she does here at Edmentum, and then we'll go over to Shannon.
Hello, I am Nikki. I'm a customer success manager here at Edmentum, and that just means I support the success of all of my schools and in whatever capacity they need, providing resources and working to meet the goals that we set together and collaborate on. And I did teach third, fourth, and fifth grade during my time in the classroom, and I did use ExactPath as a teacher. And so I always love coming to my partners with that experience and being able to share in that with them.
Excellent. Shannon, can you tell our participants here about you, your role, and also tell us about your district. Tell us about your student population, the schools, and all of the students you serve there.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Thanks for having me today. I'm Shannon Carroll-Frey. I get to be the Director of Secondary Teaching and Learning here in Center Grove. I am a former, in this district, elementary principal, actually, and I've also been a middle school assistant principal in Bloomington. I was an assistant principal at Brebeuf Jesuit in Indianapolis. I was in Lawrence Township, Martinsville. I have just had the blessings of working with all three levels, high school, middle school, elementary, and I currently get to serve our secondary buildings here in Center Grove. We are a district of just under 10,000 students. We have one high school and two, which is comprehensive, and we have two middle schools, which run between 1,100 and 1,300 in each of our middle schools and about 3,000 in our high school. So we have a lot of kids. We are a very blessed district. We are high performing. We're very proud of that, but we are always striving to get better every day for our students. So hopefully that gives you a little bit about myself and our school.
Excellent, excellent. And I love that context of the experience you've had at each level, elementary, middle, high school, because that's so relevant to what we're talking about here today as we're talking about secondary intervention, and we'll really be zeroing in on those middle grades and understanding that programs for those students are unique. There's really particular things that need to be addressed. I'd love to start there and talk about with your secondary intervention programs, what are some of the top things you're focused on in those programs that you're trying to address, the goals you have for your students, and really particular to those secondary grades.
So in our secondary schools, and I don't think this is unique for our district, we are continuing to increase our structures and our systems and get better at our MTSS structures in our secondary schools. Our elementary schools have had pretty clean and tight procedures for a number of years, and we are now, especially in Indiana, with the K-8 reading plan expectation and with math MTSS coming on board as a expectation as well. Our middle schools are really working to more formalize our structures that we've had in place, but that we want to make better. So our student goals in MTSS specific to ExactPath for our use have been just in the English language arts side of things. We have been focused on using the learning paths as a tier 2. So our teachers, all of our teachers have access to ExactPath if they are an English language arts teacher. So all of our courses, honors and regular level. And as teachers are getting ready to deliver that tier 1, they can use ExactPath as a partner in that tier 1, but they tend to use it, and we've talked about it more as a tier 2. So you've delivered your first best instruction and things didn't go necessarily the way you want it to. So we pull in ExactPath as that next best partner in working on getting kids up to speed in that tier 2. And then we do have some students that even after the core and more of tier 2, they need more. And sometimes it's just more time, which we would consider that to be a potential tier 3. And that can still be an ExactPath from Edmentum, but that kind of gives you the overall of how we are using ExactPath in our secondary schools. And the only other thing you may want to know is that, as I mentioned, that's coming from our English language arts teachers, but we do have an interventionist in each of our middle schools that is a non-licensed teacher that can also take directions from our language arts teacher and use that ExactPath in a non-class period to continue that education. So that was a lot and maybe not what you were looking for, but hopefully that gives you the overview.
Excellent. Yeah, well, I'm going to correct you on one point, which is that there's many other things I'd like to know. I hope so. It's my job here to get you to share. So I really appreciate that context, and you referenced, of course, how ExactPath is part of your program there, and you're using it, and we'll be discussing that throughout the conversation, right? As really in context of your holistic program, all the important work that you're doing, that your teachers in the classroom are doing, right? Building leaders, et cetera. And then how does ExactPath, how does your partnership with Nikki and the Edmentum team fit into all of that? But to contextualize it, I think it's so important to maybe start with highlighting what brought you to ExactPath in the first place, right? Understanding that every school and district out there has a variety of tools and resources they're using, and then they're evaluating, how is this working for my students? How is it working for us? And we won't specify, of course, exactly everything you were using before. We'll call it inexact path, but with your previous tools and resources, what were some of the challenges and the opportunities you were identifying in how maybe it wasn't quite able to achieve what you wanted to for your students, right? And some of the things that you were looking toward when saying, okay, what are the alternatives? How might ExactPath help us accomplish some of the things that we're just not quite able to do with, what you were using prior?
Mhm. I would say that with some of the tools that we have um, inserted into our MTSS structures previously, we had some unintentional misuse of those products, which were resulting in students spending hours and hours and hours trying to work on things independently, of skills that they weren't ready to do on their own. And so that resulted in frustration, and then also frustration for parents, and we would hear it would bubble up, right? And I don't think that those products were necessarily, I am certain it was unintentional misuse. And we tried to do some shaping around that, but it just, it didn't end up being the best match. ExactPath is not while it does have an algorithm, it does create an automated learning path that's individualized to a student's needs. It's not intended to be here you go, like, go do this. And Nikki, when she meets with us, every time we'll say, did you look at the knowledge map? And have you noticed any of the, if a student has a certain number of skills, like 3 or 4 or 5 skills in a row that they have not mastered, the teacher report should be, the teacher should be flagging those kids and pulling them into small group. And then ExactPath goes further and has resources that those teachers can pull in to help reteach. So I mentioned before that it's our core language arts teachers that are really driving the boat, right? They're the ones who have exact path assigned to them and the students under them. But we do have an interventionist who is not a licensed teacher who can work with the students as well. And that teacher also, because of the way we're able to assign it in the tech world, that teacher can also pull in some of those like they're basically PDFs of like, here's what you do, here's how you can teach this. It's more scripted. And if you're not a licensed teacher, but you've had a licensed teacher tell you, hey, do this or pull this, or you can look here, then that can be a benefit. So for us, the exact path structure and resources is it's never going to replace our strong core instruction. It's never going to replace a licensed, amazing teacher that does great work. And Nikki will tell you that every time she meets with her teacher, she says the same thing. You guys are the best intervention, but here's how this tool can help you. So that's why for us, Exact Path has been the best match we found. And when we started using the product, the teachers, administrators will get this. How long am I going to have that? How long am I going to have that? And I've told them we have to be able to show results in order to spend money on this. And as funding changes, that's critical. So the teachers know that that's what we have to do. So, and they want it. They want to keep it. So that I think says a lot too. Nikki's laughing, I can tell, but she knows it's true. Every time we get on a thing, how much longer? We're gonna have this next year, right?
Yes, yes. I love what you said too, Shannon, about maximizing that human capital and how,
Mhm.
as a teacher, sometimes we were asked, for those intervention groups, it was all hands on deck. And like you said, some of those aren't certified teachers. And without having to tax the classroom teacher with creating more lesson plans for those other groups, those resources can easily be pushed out to them. So I definitely did that myself. And I love that you knocked that one out of the park. That was exactly what was happening in your schools and in mine too. So
Excellent. Well, and to a lot of those points as well, Nikki, would love to have you share your perspective on, okay, once the decision's been made by the district, we want to move forward. We've identified exact path that we feel like is a great solution for us. We want to move forward with that. We know that the decision is being made because they've identified outcomes they want to achieve. So they're not just choosing a product, they're choosing a partner and saying, okay, we believe Exact Path and Edmentum, right, as a partner are going to help us succeed because otherwise we all, regardless of what our roles are, we all have to make similar decisions around, well, this other thing might be a little bit better than what I'm using now, but then I have to learn it. And is it really worth it? And when you're scaling across a district, right, and then all my teachers are going to have to learn this new tool, they're going to have questions about, am I going to learn this? And then in a year or two, have to learn something else. What does that look like? How much should I commit? How do I know? How is it practical for me? How do I know that it's worth it? And how do I know that this was the right choice, right? So that's of course where you're going to come in and have those conversations and really support that process to ensuring that it is a successful move.
absolutely. We definitely sit down at the beginning of an implementation and create goals to make sure that they're reaching the outcomes that they want, and then creating a support plan for teachers because change is hard, and especially when teachers are juggling so many other things. And so we definitely work together on a plan of support and then call in our PD team to provide that support for them. And like I said, whether it's leave behinds, like some little instructions or check-ins, whatever we have to do to make sure that they are successful, we will do. And on top of that, it truly is a partnership as a CSM. Most, if not all of us, are former educators. And so we have a heart for their kids to succeed too. Their kids kind of become our kids. We want to see their success just as much as they do. So it does become a true partnership.
Yeah, excellent.
Yeah, and I would just piggyback real quickly to say it's because of Nikki and her role that I'm able to know that exact path can happen effectively in our buildings. She works directly with our instructional coaches in our buildings to make sure that teachers can get what they need. She shows up in our buildings and sits and looks and talks to teachers and how's this working. She does check-ins throughout. It is that part of the partnership is across all the vendors that I work with personally. And I'm the corporation test coordinator, and I work with a whole lot of textbook companies for all of our, I mean, this partnership is by far the best value that I have because of
You're
Nick.
making me blush, Shannon.
Good. Nobody else can have her, by the way. Let's not make that happen. No. Actually, I'll share. But I mean, he's amazing.
You're so sweet.
Excellent. That's wonderful. Yeah, I'd love to get into a couple of more of the specific elements and what it ends up looking like in implementation and how creating again that context about what educators are looking for in the classroom. I think one of the things you referenced it briefly earlier, or at least in part, right, that sometimes um, there can be a challenge around repetitive practice with tools, or time that just becomes, it gets apart from that really purposeful use of saying, okay, we know what our goals are here. We know we have the personalization. This student needs to work on these things. We want to target that. We want it to be happening in a fashion that supports the educator by helping them, right, scale that personalization, but then on the other end, right, brings the students back to what happens next. And so that really requires that the time be well spent, that it not also be repetitive, demotivating for students, right? And so you're balancing students' interest, their understanding of what they're learning, the role that the teacher plays. I'm curious about like what you have found about in some of those regards regarding how exact path facilitates that and what that really looks like for your teachers and the way that they are using it within their right their instructional environment and all of the various things that they're attempting to help students achieve.
Well, I would say that there's going to be variations of this. What I'm going to describe is like what we aspire to have happening at in our flow, basically of our MTSS, right? So our teacher is delivering their first best instruction based on our curriculum maps and assessments, and Exact Path is also available to them as something that they can use as formatives. The new tool, Nikki's going to correct me when I get it wrong, Standards
Standards
Mastery.
mastery or
Thank you.
proficiency, yes.
Our teachers just got a little taste of that. And again, I'm getting questions about, can we have that again next year? They are able to pull in they can go to a standard and pull a set of, I'm going to get this, help me when I get it wrong. I think it's 5 or 10 questions. 10 questions. Thank you, Nikki. And then, but I think they can customize from that too and make it less if they want. But the teachers are they're specific to a state standard. And so they can use that in addition to what they're already using within their core unit or as a PLC if they want to check in. So they use Exact Path as a part of core, but it's not our main core, it's not our adopted material. The PLC also leans into our checkpoint. So we opted in, yes, to have our learning path adjust each time we have new checkpoint data. So our teachers do the benchmark at the start of the year. And I think Nikki said there might be a potential of next year being able to look back to the iLearn data, but right now they're doing fingers crossed. But right now they're doing the diagnostic or benchmark in the fall. And then after the first checkpoint, when we're finished, then we do a sync, and Nikki helps us get that sync set up and get the right date set. And then what that allows is for our students that were not yet at or above proficiency, our middle schools run intervention. So those students for certain are going to be doing tier 2 in exact path to try to focus on those skills that they were not yet proficient on. So we still have core going on and all of that fun, but we have this and more that's just been cycled in. And so we're able to then see what happens then between both in exact path by tracking their learning skills that they're growing in. And then also in checkpoint data, we can see, okay, here's where they were at the end of checkpoint 1. Here's comparatively, here's where they are at checkpoint 2. And in the state's central reporting system, well, it's not the state's, it's Cambium's, our test vendor for the state. We can look and see what the predictive percent pass for our state test summative is. So we're able to track and triangulate all of that fun to see how our students and keep moving forward with both our core and information from exact path about core, and then also tracking how they are growing towards those skills in exact path if they're doing a tier 2. And then it's just hopefully going to be an amazing, amazing summative that we're working on giving right now. I will say last year we opted into the checkpoints, and last year that did shape some of our tier 2 that I just talked about. And we were using exact path last year as well. It didn't align. We couldn't integrate them like we can this year, last year, but our teachers used it in that same way where they were digging in, and we saw some very nice increases in our middle school percent pass. And the state data center, anybody can go look and see what every school by grade, what their scores were by year. But we were pleased, and we're hopeful that we're going to have an even bigger increase this year.
Excellent.
I don't remember the original question or why I'm even discussing all of that at this point. So you're going to have to remind me, Ross.
Oh, who knows? No, I think we were. I mean, you got into an important point there about the assessment integration, because that pertains to so many of the important realities within districts, right? And it's what we here at Edmentum really call our less testing, more learning approach. To say if you're already taking the iLearn assessment in Indiana, or if you're using NWEA MAP, Renaissance Star, depending on the state you are, what you're using, right? And you like that data, you know that data is good. Why have students retake another assessment to give you a duplicate of the data when what they really need to be doing is working on what the data tells you, right? And that skill. And I think that's something I'd love to give Nikki an opportunity to add more to that. Shannon also referenced the predictive piece, right? Of knowing, okay, based on what we're seeing, and we can kind of tell what we'd anticipate students are going to do in the next assessment cycle, and what does that enable their educators to do, and to make decisions as they're preparing for that. But that integration being so crucial, not only is it uh, demotivating for students to be retaking things or just doing more and more assessments, but also there's not a lot of discretionary time, right, to go around. Like all of our time has to be well spent. We need to be focused on the learning, and I mean, can be tremendously impactful in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And not only just a time saving, by utilizing the data that's already there, but in addition to that, it's the game that we have to play. I mean, it's what teachers, we want to see our scores grow as teachers. And so in order to do that, ExactPath has a linking study with our state assessment, which is huge. And then sometimes our state assessment summative data doesn't come out until the next fall after, as a teacher, I no longer have those students. What is great about this integration of the checkpoints is that once the checkpoint syncs, I am getting updated learning path or updated support needs for all of my students as we're going throughout the year, rather than having to wait until the end of the year. So I really do appreciate the checkpoints feeding into it. I think that it's been a powerful tool for a lot of my schools that are, trying to win the game that we play, and trying to help students be as successful as possible. And um, yeah, I guess that's probably all I have to say about that one. But we do have a diagnostic, like Shannon said, because Cambium hasn't released the summative results to us from last year. This is a new integration, so we're still working on the summative piece. But because of that, we were easily able to pivot to our own diagnostic inside of the platform. It's called the Exact Path Insights. And so we were able to give that at the beginning of the year to initiate those differentiated learning paths right off the bat. And then from then on, no extra assessments were needed for the rest of the school year because we were able to do those checkpoints.
And I would just piggyback and say that I was surprised last year when we met with the language arts department chairs and we talked about what do we want to opt in to the checkpoints. They also wanted to put another diagnostic mid-year because the checkpoint timing and when we're giving it was not going to allow them to get fresh, crispy data on any students that moved in. And we don't, as a district, have a ton, but we do have students that we want to be able, that move in at different times and a teacher can assign where for a path for a student, but the diagnostic is much better. And for a student that hasn't come to us or that we don't have information about, that the teachers valued that. I will just say it that way. So I think we will probably do that same structure again next year so that the teachers at the start of second semester can still catch those kids.
I'd love to hear, Shannon, about just when you are making decisions and designing and structuring your program overall. Right? Part of that is how you're selecting the different tools and resources that you're going to use, but there's also all these other decisions. How you are working to design it so that it's accounting for both the educator needs and the student needs, right? We know some examples where it's one answer that the answer is both needs, right? We talked about that with the assessment. I think that's a great example where having those integrations and data, like there's obvious how that benefits both educators and students, and everybody's happy. There's other things where you have to weigh things a little differently, right? We made a decision about a new resource that we feel like is really going to be the best for our students, but we know that comes with challenges for educators, and so we have to work through how vice versa we want to solve these challenges educators are facing, but we need to investigate it a little more and make sure that it makes sense for our learners and how that all works together. Just curious, right, as a leader in this role, what are some of the questions you ask or some of the ways you work through those decisions to ensure that educators and students are all represented in the strategy?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think as leaders, it's difficult to find that right balance. Obviously, student learning always trumps. And if it means that we need to find a way to support our teachers in either learning or having time to do something in order to make that student need happen, then that's what we do as leaders. In terms of thinking through exact path and like why would I choose exact path over other resources that balance student and teacher needs, I would say I was in a lucky position because teachers were asking for a resource that would balance both, that would give them normed data about where students are and have a partner of the learning path. And some of the other pieces that other options and tools that I looked at had assessment pieces. They could tell the teacher where students were, but they didn't have the learning path side.
Mhm.
So, I mean, yeah, we used some diagnostic resources for a very, very long time. And that was the biggest issue. It was good for teachers to know where students were. It was good for students and families to know where their kids were, but we couldn't partner it with the learning path side. So, if I can get, as a leader, if I can kill two birds with one stone, I will do that. And
It
in this
really
case, that was probably my leadership decision was, oh, I can have both.
Yes. I was just going to add to that. It just makes the data actionable. I don't have to pore over the data. It turns into action right away with the integration, because then it's the learning path and it's being addressed right away. So that was one thing. And then logistically, Shannon, something that I work on the back end of is that it lives on the same platform as courseware. So working with your tech team and the high school using our courseware product, it was very easy for us to bring on. And so just ease of use then for teachers because, two birds, one stone kind of thing there too.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, in fact, I mean, building on that, would love to give you, Shannon, an opportunity to kind of um, shout out your educators. I mean, tell me about, like, what are some of the things that your educators are doing to help students be successful, right? Like, what are some of the strategies that it could be, of course, part of the entirety of the program, but also I'm sure things you're observing as you're seeing, okay, yeah, this is really effective. I really like what these teachers are doing. I like what these building leaders are,
Mhm.
are having their educators do, et cetera. But of course, teaching and learning happens when teachers are doing great work, right? So would love to hear what you've observed and what you've also designed, right? And how does it work and what is working well for your students?
Sure. Our instructional framework that we lean into and center grow for our secondary schools is Marzano's New Art and Science of Teaching. And so when we talk about what does high quality instruction and teaching and learning look like in our secondary schools, that's the framework that we lean into. We are also a professional learning community district, and so our teachers are given time twice a week, where we are either spending time as PLC teams or we have professional development time. So things that I've seen teachers do really well in our district and would be if you go into our PLC teams, you will see teachers that are thinking about what do I want students to know? How do I know that they know it? What am I going to do if they haven't? And what am I going to do if they already have? And Exact Path supports the question 3 and question 4, right? If we're using the foundations of the new art and science and our best first instruction, and it's not getting us the results we expect, or we have kids that need extension, when you're talking about a secondary school, a teacher probably has 6 classes here. They probably have 30 to 35, maybe more kids in a class. That is a lot of individualized learning.
Mm,
And our teachers work really hard to know where our kids are and where they need to go next. And they lean into their colleagues during that PLC discussion to figure out and lean into each other and how did you teach that? You got better results, or um how did you teach that? I want to do that next year, or I did that best this time. Why don't you do it? Um, I see our teachers share students across win time. I think a lot of secondary schools have time set aside for either students to ask to go get help with, or for students to get pulled for help with teachers. We do that in our middle schools and in our high school. And again, the Exact Path comes alongside of our core program and our core instructional resources and helps support our teachers in being able to support 160, 170 students that they might have on their caseload.
Yeah. Um, and this discussion has referenced making data actionable. You were talking about, okay, if we're doing all the right things and we're not getting the results, now what do we do? But it's basically another form of diagnostic, Nikki, right? That you would work together on, okay, what's the data showing us? How are students doing? What are educators doing? And all right, if we're doing all these things that we believe are correct and we are still looking to achieve something else, how do we dive into that? How do we kind of deconstruct it, right? And diagnose, all right, what should we focus on? And sometimes that focus is on, usage and implementation support. Sometimes it's other elements, right? But it's having, when everything is clear in that way, then you have the ability to look at it and ask those questions and figure out, oh, this is what's happening, or we're not
Mhm.
doing this the way we wanted to, or not everybody in the building is implementing this strategy, right? And so we can see where the difference is there. But I would, maybe would love to hear from both of you, as you're partnering on that, right? How do you go about, it's a continuous improvement process either way. It's not always something is not going well, but it's saying, all right, now we're doing this. How do we make it a little better? Okay, now we have a lot of students doing really successfully. How do we help some of these others? Or now we're in year one, now it's year two, year three. How do we get a little bit better? And where do we find those opportunities in partnership? And would just love to hear your perspectives on what that looks like and how you go about that when you understand very clearly what the program is supposed to be like. I would imagine it gives you a starting point and it gives you it gives you a lot that you can focus on together.
Do you want to go first, Shannon?
No, I'm hoping that you're going to say what I think you're going to say. And if you don't, I'm going to prompt you to say it.
Okay, good. Okay. So we have research that shows that using or completing 8 skills every semester is what will show significant impact on assessments. And so that's because we already have that research, it's already been done, we know it's proven to work. Then I can work with my partners like Shannon to say, hey, if we can get the kids across this finish line, then we know you're going to see results. And so we make a goal around usage for sure, simply because we want time spent on any platform to be fruitful. And so we don't want it to just be a sit and get. It needs to be engaging. It needs to be at their level so that the teacher can maybe shift and do some small group instruction while they're getting the most out of a program. So there's a lot of things that we can do to make sure that everyone in the room is getting what they need, even though a teacher is a human and cannot necessarily differentiate 30 different ways in one class period. And so that is something that ExactPath can come alongside. And then because we're able to write those goals specifically based on that research, we can see, are we tracking towards that? Are we doing a good job? What are the barriers? Is it, oh, we don't have enough time? Okay, how can we carve out the time? And where does it belong in the school day, especially at the secondary level? That's always a crunch. And so finding the time and really helping teachers to make it a priority. And then, yeah, I guess that would be my answer. I don't know that I said what I was supposed to say though, Shannon.
You did a good job. You get an A plus.
Thanks.
Yeah. And I mean, I was just gonna say, Nikki, when she comes along in those check-ins and says, okay, here's where we are in usage, it is, I have never said to the teachers here in Center Grove, you have to go in, if you are not hitting, is it 40 minutes and 8 skills? Like I have not treated ExactPath like that. Now, we may get tighter but we aren't currently doing it that way. But the teachers, because Nikki comes alongside and says, hey, here's what our data looks like in this building. Here's what our data looks like in this building. They look at it and they kind of, and then now they can also compare it to their checkpoint data, right? And they can see, I didn't take advantage of this. And I think through that over time, I don't know whether Nikki would agree or not. I feel like we have naturally had more and more teachers that have said, oh, that worked for so and so. I would like, I think I'm going to give that a try as well. So
Yeah.
it it is not a exact path is not our core program. So I am not telling teachers you absolutely have to use this, but we are telling them this is a very effective resource to support our students that show that they need it and or for you to use as a come alongside for your core when you
And if you
find that
want to
kids
see
are
it
not there.
work,
And
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 if you want
and
to see
there's
it work, this is what you have to get to.
right. You have
Yeah.
to do it to,
Yeah.
right. It won't
Yes.
work unless you do it. So
Yes.
the very nice like check-ins that show us that data make it very easy for teachers to naturally want to take advantage of this resource. And I will
Yeah.
also say, because at the beginning of the year, Nikki also does a like, here's how for teachers that are brand new, because we always have teachers that are brand new, here's how you use it, like getting started. And then for the teachers that have used it before, she goes deeper. So we always schedule that for the beginning of the year, and then she stays with us alongside in the whole year. And Nikki, the only other thing I was going to say is you have to give your one of your examples of how when you were in the class, here is what,
Oh
because
yeah.
the teachers love those.
Yes, yeah. Well, I always use the example. I had one student who I couldn't figure out what the issue was. And when we open up, because you can see the students' answers on the learning path questions on the mastery quizzes, and I was like, oh, he's adding denominators. That was what the answer was that he was choosing every time. And so it's like the data that I got from Exact Path, I was able to make actionable. I could easily address what needed to be done after
And
that.
when
But
Nikki shows the human side that partners with it to our teachers, that's when they understand, oh, that's how I'm supposed to use it.
yeah, it's definitely not a passive program where we can just put kids on it and let them ride. It's definitely something where the student has to stay engaged in order to move themselves forward. And then we also need teachers to engage to look at that data and then mine out what's most important and take care of the student needs. Because you're right, we are educator first here at Edmentum. I do always say that. And the reason is because at the end of the day, we need that human teacher to interact because they're the best asset everybody has. So
Yeah, yeah, and then the importance of having actionable insights and data at all levels, right? You referenced all the research that's been done time and again to show it's that 8+ skills per semester at about 40 minutes per week. The 40 minutes basically comes from it, I think
yeah.
because it corresponds to what gets you to working on those 8 skills, right? But it's very
Mhm.
clear for teachers to say it's exactly what it is. It's been studied over and over again, all student groups, all kinds of states, no matter where it is, this is very repeatable and achievable, and
Mhm.
you know what it looks like. And then you also have your data inside your own district to see
Yeah.
how that looks and it's actionable as well. So they pair together. It's not just one or the other, but it's coming in with the ability to provide that kind of a plan and have everybody have that clear understanding, takes out the uncertainty of what that would look like.
Something else that Shannon and I looked at last year was the impact report too in Exact
Hmm.
Path. We can do that with MWEA, RunStar, I believe, and then the diagnostic. And we're still developing it for iLearn. But the impact report and Exact Path, because it's still new, the integration's still new, but the impact report really does show growth from, you can see how much more the students who did hit that research-based level, how much more they grew than the students who didn't hit that research-based level of 8+ skills. So that has also been something that we discussed at length last year with the iLearn integration. We were like, okay, we won't be able to have the impact report, but it's more important to have that iLearn integration this year. So we went that direction, but I know the team is working on that in the future. So definitely a powerful report.
Yeah, absolutely. Nikki, is there anything that comes to mind for you when you think about, your partners that you work with, if you could say, all right, I would love to take you along for a day when I go and visit Shannon and Center Grove, and there's one thing that they do really well or very interestingly there that I would love everybody to be able to see. It's something great to learn from. It's a strategy to pick up on. It's just part of the way they've designed their program, right? That's
Mhm.
all right. You know what? Everybody could sort of learn something from this, and just like what do you wish other
Oh
folks could
gosh.
observe? Yeah.
Gosh, well, they have really invested teachers that, you know, remove barriers for kids, no matter what it is. And I'm always there to help if there is something that I can help with. They also have two dedicated coaches that Shannon mentioned earlier that stay engaged with me. And I know that that may sound like something small, but staying engaged with the vendor, it really allows me to share all the updates that are coming, to make sure that they are mining out the most important data, to make sure that they're able to make instructional, changes if they, oh gosh, so and so looks like usage has gone down a bit. Oh, it turns out there was a reason, maybe she was, having trouble with something. And so I would say what they do well is just staying engaged and utilizing tools with a purpose, uh, and really goal setting, focusing on outcomes, and that it's not just a program, it truly is a partnership, and how can we make it work the best for kids. So that's, I guess, what I would say.
But, Shannon, what would you like to share? What do you know think your peers would like to know about if they are addressing similar challenges to what you've had in the past, and what how you've learned and iterated and built your program over time? What's something you'd like to communicate to them to say, oh, this is what we were working on, this is what we're doing now, it worked really well for us, try this.
I think probably the biggest change that we have made would be that addition of the linking with the checkpoints. I mean, prior to that, we got good um information from the diagnostic, but we did always feel like, and you mentioned this a couple times already, Ross, it's that catch-22 of how much testing is too much testing. In our past life, we used NWEA and also had the diagnostic, and so it was just a lot of testing. And so the and that was took me to, like, my brain froze there for a second thinking about all of that testing. So to come back to the exact path piece and what we learned, having the checkpoints connected to that has been the biggest change. And if any district is considering products that and want to know whether that API is a useful part of it, I would say yes, it is. And I don't know whether I would look at a product that didn't do that now that we have had that benefit. And I look very much forward to that impact study being done so that we'll be able to use that part in the future as well. Nikki's right. When we didn't have connection to checkpoints and we were just using the impact report, it is meaningful. And sometimes I would hang my head like, oh, maybe we didn't hit enough numbers. Like, like we didn't take advantage of as much as we should have. The weight of it. But the impact report is meaningful and can help move your district forward in effective fidelity-based implementation.
Yeah. I was going to say, I just thought of something else too. I think in the secondary space, it's very difficult to carve out time for spending time working on a platform. And so Center Grove has done a really amazing job of using it with purpose and making sure it fits into the schedule, because it is a priority and it can, come alongside, but it can only come alongside if we commit some time to it. And I would say, I know that's extra hard when, you know, an elementary teacher, you have the same kids all day long. So it's easier to be flexible with how and when you put exact path into your schedule. But with secondary, Shannon, I don't know if you can speak to it, but they've found a way to make it work.
I think for my best case scenario is that we're using our win time every
Yeah.
day for
Hmm.
whether it's
Like
exact
small
path
group and that.
or small group, right? And again, I just do not want to, if I walk into a building as a leader and I see a bunch of kids on devices for 20 minutes, that is not what I'm looking for. But if I walk in and I see effective use of students having a individualized learning path and teachers that are interacting with them about their success in that or about their areas where they need support to continue to move forward, that's what I want to see. I get really nervous when if I say to teachers, you have to have kids on there X number of minutes because I don't want them to default to, okay, well, I put them on the computer for a few. That's not what I'm looking for at all. But um, the partnership has worked well, I think, in that having Nikki show, here's where we are, here's how many kids that earned this, and being able to take that information and then reflect on, okay, where are we connecting kids with exact path? Are there other kids that would also could hit 8? What would we have to give up for those students to do this? Oh, we would just have to not have them, do this other product or whatever for 10 minutes. Yeah. How simple would that be? Whatever those we can make those choices, those student first choices, because we have a partnership that provides that data to reflect and make those student first choices.
Excellent. Well, participants, I'm going to pull up our slide here just to give you a preview of some of the additional resources that will come your way. So you'll get the recording of this session and this article about Furman Middle School, which is in South Carolina, really relevant to a lot of what Shannon was talking about. It's how they make sure that their tier one and tier two work well to support each other with those middle school learners. So a good story there, another success story on a Texas district and how they're using the NWA map integration with ExactPath to help them achieve their results. We have some more research and additional webinar on getting those schools ready for Algebra 1, right? Those students in those middle grades, how they're working toward that. So all of it really relates to this conversation. And as I show this, I want to go back. I'll go to Shannon and Nikki one final time here. So we'll start with Nikki and then we'll give Shannon the last word. Any last thing you'd like to share? Any final notes, insights, successes, anything before we wrap here?
Oh gosh. I would say that I'm excited that some of our middle school content is being refreshed over the summer for back to school, and that it is all like backwards planned or backwards designed to help support students in those gateway courses in high school, English 9 and algebra, just to really help make sure that they can be successful because I know that those are predictive of graduation. So I'm excited for the refresh. It's always good to get new stuff. So I'm excited for how the kids are going to react to the newer lessons. So and more printed materials too for some of those too. So
Yeah. Shannon, any last note?
Man, I feel like I've said a lot today. I would just say thank you to the Edmentum team for all that you do to try to partner with us and providing for the best success for every one of our students learning at high levels.
Excellent. Well, thank you both so much. Thank you so much, Shannon, for joining us here and sharing. Thank you, Nikki, for being here. Thank you to all of our participants who joined live, anybody who's watching the recording on our website, YouTube, all those places. We know that you'll continue to dig in there. If you are getting the recording via email, please feel free to reply directly to that email if you have a question or you want to learn more about any of this. That'll go right to a real person, and we'll get to you with some responses, and we can help you understand more about all of the bases here in the research. And you can also dive into these additional resources at your leisure. So thanks everybody for joining us. We appreciate you being here, and once again, we really thank Shannon and Nikki for being here to share.